You're thinking about moving out. It's super expensive. Are you sure you can afford it?
Hey, I'm Alex.
And I'm Philip.
And we teach you what you need to know about being a grown-up.
Because adulting shouldn't suck. If you're new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the comments below. Let us know how much money you think you need to be able to move out.
In this video, we're going to talk about choosing where to live, figuring out if you need roommates or not, budgeting for all the stuff you need in order to actually move out, and then how much money you need to save up to move out.
But before we get started, we want to tell you guys about our 12 steps to moving out of your parents' house. It's a great video that we created, and it comes with a downloadable checklist that's free. The link's going to be in the description below, so make sure you check it out. You're going to have a lot of things to think about when it comes to finding a place to rent. Do you want to be close to work? Do you want to be close to school? Do you want to be close to family and friends? Are you going to be able to afford to live out on your own? Do you need a roommate? Do you need multiple roommates? Do you know people that you would want to be roommates with? These are going to be the basic questions that you have to ask yourself before you ever even get started on figuring out how much you can afford for rent.
Once you've answered those questions, the next logical question is, how much money do you make? So how much money do you bring home every month? And then where does that money go? Do you have a budget? When you move out, you absolutely have to have a budget, and landlords are going to look at this, and they use what's called the 30% rule. So the 30% rule means out of all of your money, 30% of it, max, should be spent on rent and utilities. And utilities are things like water, sewer, gas, garbage. Now, the 30% rule, it's kind of a soft rule. You don't have to stick to that, but the more you go beyond 30% and you're at the 40% or 50% threshold, the harder it's going to be to live your life and get by.
Life is expensive.
Bigger cities are going to be a lot more expensive for rent, and they're going to cost probably a lot more than 30% of your overall income. So just be prepared. You're going to probably have to spend like 40 or 50% of your income to live in a big city, especially somewhere like New York or San Diego. So the way you figure out how much money you can spend on rent is you take your monthly income, and let's use an example of, I don't know, $2,000 a month after taxes. You're going to take that $2,000, you're going to multiply it by 0.3, right, 30%, and then you're going to get your amount that you can cover for rent, or you can spend on rent. So 2,000 times 0.3, that's what, $600 a month. That's going to cover rent and utilities.
So if you don't have any places to rent in your area or wherever you're wanting to rent for $600, that's going to tell you right there if you're going to need a roommate or not. Okay? Okay.
So in order to have a roommate for a $2,000 apartment for a 3-bedroom, which, depending on where you live, that might be expensive, that might be cheap, I don't know. But you're going to have 2 roommates to be able to cover that.
Yeah. I mean, if rent's $2,000, yeah.
And then you're still going to spend more than $600.
So let's say rent is $2,000 where you live. You're going to need some roommates. And if you have 2 roommates and you all 3 pay an equal amount of rent, you're going to be at $666 each just for your rent portion, which goes over that 30%. And that's not even including your utilities. So if you wanted to add in utilities, that's probably going to be an additional $100 a person, which brings you guys to $766 a person for your guys' monthly portion to pay your rent and utilities.
So you've already blown past that 30%.
Already blown past the 30%, which, if that's what you got to do, that's what you have to do. But maybe you should look for a cheaper place. If you can find a place that's $1,500 a month for rent and you have 2 roommates, then that's going to keep you within that 30% rule, which is going to help you guys afford life. Because like we had already said, life is expensive. And when you guys are taking on all this new financial responsibility, you want to make sure that you guys can pay your bills.
So going beyond the 30% doesn't sound terrible up front in the examples that Philip just gave. But if you're spending that $766 a month and all you had was $600 a month for budgeting, that's $176 a month extra that you can't spend on other stuff. And you're going to have a lot of stuff to pay for when you're living on your own other than just rent and utilities. And if you're spending that $176 beyond what you can afford, that's just probably going to cut into like stuff you can do to have a life, or money you could save up for a savings or a vacation. So trying to get by and get an apartment as cheap as possible rather than like the nicest apartment possible is ideal when you're first starting out, because you're probably new to budgeting and figuring all this stuff out. So you want to keep it as cheap as possible. On top of paying for rent and utilities, you got monthly expenses that you got to pay for. And this stuff adds up quick, which is why it's so important to keep your rent low. Some of this stuff, you can split it with your roommates. Other stuff, obviously, you got to pay for it all on your own. So things like internet, okay? Average internet cost is like $100 a month. It ain't free. And between the three of you, you can split it up, right? So it's only like $30, $33 a month, depending on what kind of service provider you have. Then you got other stuff like subscriptions. And I'm just going to throw it out. You only have $100 a month in subscriptions when the average person has $273 a month that they pay out for subscriptions. So we're going to go on the low end here and say all you got is like a gym membership, Spotify, and Netflix, and maybe one other thing. So keep those as low as you can, because that'll nickel and dime you to death. Mm-hmm. You got other stuff like your cell phone bill, right? You can have a cheaper cell phone plan, $50-ish a month. You know, it'll be cheaper if you stay on your parents' plan. If you can stay on your parents' plan or get on a buddy's plan. I know you've always had somebody on your plan paying less, which is nice. But that'll be cheaper. Or you can go with something more expensive like Verizon, and then you're not dropping calls all the time. But we'll talk about that in a second. You got car insurance. If you got a car, on average, it's like $125, $150 a month. You got gas you got to pay for, which is super expensive everywhere right now. So let's say you got to drive to school, you got to drive to work, whatever. You got to drive around to go have a life. I would say anywhere from like $150 to $200 a month, depending on what kind of car you got. You have a car payment. Hopefully you don't have one of those, because if you do, you're not going to be able to afford all this stuff. So let's say you have a car that's paid off, right? You got like a $4,000 or $5,000 car that you paid in cash, or you already paid it off, or maybe your parents gave it to you. You got food. On average, eating out and buying groceries, let's say you spend like $300 a month, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. Groceries are freaking expensive. Eating out's expensive. Uber Eats is expensive.
So expensive.
Rent and utilities, like we talked about, let's say it's $600. So between all that, you're at $1,520. You got some money left over. That's not bad, right? If you're bringing home $2,000 a month, like we said earlier. So then that means you can put $200 a month in savings, or $100, in investments, or whatever you want to do. You got like $300-ish, $400 left over that you can spend however to have a life. Now, if you have that extra $176, that just chips away at other things, right? That chips away at your savings or your ability to go out and have fun. So these things are super important to stay within that 30%. Otherwise, these are just your general bills, like I was talking about. You might have other bills that come up. I don't know. Maybe you got to pay for your own insurance. Maybe you got a dog and you got to pay for their insurance and food and all the other stuff that goes along with it. I don't know what your life is like. These are just general bills. But that's why it's so important to stay at 30% or lower if you can, because these other bills, they add up super quick, and it's just going to make your life that much harder if you're house poor.
On top of those expenses that Alex was just talking about, you still have to pay for the moving expenses. And those are going to be things like your first and last month's rent. So if you have roommates and your portion of the rent was $600, that's going to be $600 for the first month, $600 for the second month. $1,200 right there. If you don't have roommates and your rent is $2,000 a month, that's what you have to pay right when you move in before you get the keys to that place. That's $4,000 because you got that first month and the second month. It's a lot of money.
And on top of that, you also have to pay a security deposit. So if you mess something up in the apartment when you move out, they have money to fix it. Now, a security deposit is usually the same price as a month's rent. So if your rent is $2,000 a month, that's an additional $2,000. That's $6,000 total between first and last month's rent and a deposit. Yeah. Now, if you got roommates and you're splitting it up, and your portion of the rent was $600 for first and last month, then you got the deposit on top of that. Between the three of those, that's $1,800 you have to save up. And your other roommates each have to save up $1,800 too.
Yeah. Last but not least, you have the moving expenses. You have to get your stuff from one place to another. And when you get there, it's empty. So you have to buy things like the shower curtain and the trash can and pots and pans. So that's an expense in itself. On top of that, if you're doing it correctly, you're going to have an emergency fund. An emergency fund is extremely important to have because it's used in emergencies. It's not if it happens, it's when it happens, and you need to be able to cover that. An emergency fund is going to be typically, the rule of thumb is 3 months worth of bills for whatever it's going to cost you. So if your portion of bills is $600, then you need 3 months of that saved up. And that's just talking about rent. That's not including the utilities or your car payments or anything else that you might have. If you guys need help on how to create an emergency fund, we got a video on that. Link's going to be in the description. Let's check it out.
So based on that example I gave earlier of all the other bills on top of rent, that was around $1,500 a month. So if you had a good emergency fund saved up, you do $1,500 a month times 3, right? So that's $4,500 a month before you moved out. Because like he was saying, it's a lot of money. I mean, we're not gonna lie about it. $4,500 a month on top of saving up all that other money to move out. It seems kind of daunting, but it's a lot easier to save that money up when you're living at home and you don't have all these other bills than trying to move out and then save up that money. It just ain't gonna happen. It'd take you forever.
Yeah, forever.
Like Philip was saying, you got to buy all kinds of stuff to furnish the apartment once you move out. And we're just going to say, I don't know, it costs you like $1,000 to do that. You can do it for more, you can do it for less. But we're going to use $1,000 for this example. So you got $1,000 to furnish the apartment. Mm-hmm. You got last month's rent and a deposit. That's another $2,000, right? So now we're up to $3,000. And then you got your emergency fund, which should be 3 months worth of bills. So that's $4,500, right? So you're looking at anywhere, moving out is going to cost you anywhere from like $6,000 to $7,500 based on a $2,000 apartment with 2 roommates.
Obviously going to be more than that if you're trying to send it all by yourself.
Or you live in a big city.
Yeah, or a big city. But things are expensive. A big thing to also remember is these apartments that you're going to try and rent from, they typically require you to make 3 times the amount of rent to be able to qualify to rent from that place. So if rent is $2,000 a month, you need to make $6,000 for you to be able to be qualified for that apartment. Now, a lot of places...
I don't know a lot of 18-year-olds that make that kind of money.
Oh, man, I know, me neither. A lot of places will allow you and your roommates to combine your income to equal that 3 times for the rent. You know, so all 3 of you guys together, if you all made $2,000 a month and you made $6,000, then you could qualify for the apartment.
Way more doable.
But some places don't. So when you guys are going to apply for these apartments, that's a question that you guys need to ask up front so you can know. Because you don't want to waste your time turning in an application and paying the money for the rental application fee to get denied because you guys don't make 3 times the rent independently. And the reason why they want you to do it independently is because sometimes a roommate will move out and they want to make sure that the other 2 roommates can still afford to pay rent if there's a falling out between roommates or somebody moves because they get accepted to a college or there's a family emergency or what have you. So ask. It's a super important question.
Like Philip mentioned earlier in this video, don't forget to download the 12 Steps to Moving Out of Your Parents' House guide. It's free. We put the link in the description. This is going to help you get a game plan together so that you can make all this stuff happen.
If you like this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. In the comments below, let us know how many roommates you think you're going to need when you move out.
And we'll see you in the next video.
Fa la 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 la.